Viral is a horror film about a mysterious parasitic virus threatening to take over the human race by altering their host's behavior, turning them into violent and dangerous monsters. Our main character is a teenage girl who has to take matters into her own hands, meaning that when her small suburban neighborhood is quarantined, making it impossible for any of the residents to flee, she, along with her sister and boyfriend, will have to barricade themselves in their house in hope of being able to protect each other and survive the epidemic. So, as you could have probably guessed, judging by that plot summary, this is another one of those modern zombie films, like in a similar vein to what the 28 Days Later started. I think that was probably the first film in which the monsters, the zombies, are actually virally infected human beings instead of reanimated corpses like the ones from the Living Dead series, or people being possessed by demonic entities like the Deadites from the Evil Dead series. Now, even though this film doesn't reinvent the wheel or anything, I was actually quite pleased to see that at least they tried to give as much of a realistic explanation for the phenomenon as possible. Because let's face it, the probability of a zombie apocalypse actually happening in the real world is fairly low, but if something like this would ever happen, it probably would be parasitic in nature. It is usually likened to an actual parasite known as Toxoplasma gondii. It can only reproduce in the intestines of a feline, and it can affect the brain of a rodent, making it completely fearless towards a cat. Therefore the cat eats the rat or the mouse, and the whole cycle begins all over again. Considering that the culprit here in this film causing the infection is parasitic in nature, it is actually an entity with a real objective. The objective being reproduction, proliferation, and benefiting from another creature's harm. The other creature in this case being us, humans. Now apparently parasites can be removed from their hosts. Now this is actually information that creates setup for the film that will have an excellent payoff later on. Because you know that if someone is infected and turned into this violent creature, you know that there's always the chance, there's always the possibility of that person being able to be turned back. Now this is not something we usually get to see in these types of films. Usually when someone is turned into a zombie, that person already belongs to the undead, that person is gone, is no more. But here this adds another layer to the suspense. The other thing I really liked about this film is just how it presents this kind of epidemic in a slightly a new way. Because usually in these sort of films we get to see a sort of aftermath of this type of apocalypse. Like I'm thinking 28 Days Later, I'm thinking I Am Legend, Dawn of the Dead, Day of the Dead, The Walking Dead. Like usually in these films we see the world when already civilization has mostly collapsed, and the only places where our survivors can still hope to find some sort of shelter are these very small outposts carefully guarded by a handful of people. But me personally, I'm always more interested in seeing what the very beginning of a disaster like this would look like. What would happen to the people who would have to remain in their homes, remain in their houses? Maybe they can't leave because they are not allowed to leave because of a quarantine. We actually get to see that here. We actually get to see officials and military basically just fucking scrambling, being just as baffled, just as confused, and just as clumsy about handling the whole situation, just as regular human beings. Now on to what I didn't like about the film, and what I didn't like about the film was to be expected. They are the jump scares. It's usually the thing that keeps me away from watching a lot of horror films, and I think I finally figured out why. I mean, besides the fact that I'm just looking at the film and just fucking jumping like an idiot every 2 minutes, it's also something that I think, especially the false jump scares, the kind of jump scares it's not really anything happening, it's just someone patting you on the back, it's like a big noise coming out of nowhere, or a cat jumping out of a window. It creates a lot of anticipation for absolutely nothing. It's precious time wasted without moving the story along, without revealing new information, and without it being scary. And it's strange because the film actually had potential at being much scarier and creepier than it is in certain parts. One of the best scenes in the film is when a zombie breaks into the house and the zombies can't see, they are blind, I forgot to mention that. Our main character is pinned up like this next to a wall because she knows if she moves, if she makes a sudden noise, then the zombie will immediately notice her and attack her. And the zombie just starts looking like a blind man in the dark and starts approaching her, starts getting closer and closer and closer. And that scene is great. I mean, that's legitimately suspenseful, and it's a legitimately edge of your seat moment. I wondered why the whole film couldn't be like that. But the characters and the excellent way these actors portray them more than make up for this film's shortcomings. I legitimately cared about the characters, I wanted to see them stick together, I wanted to see them survive. They didn't just feel like stock characters in a cheap horror movie, they actually felt like real human beings. And that's the most you could ask from a film like this. I think the film succeeds. It's not something I would call a good film by many standards. It's a competent film. If you're a fan of this genre, you might enjoy it. If you're not, don't watch this. You will hate it. You will hate me for talking about it. But I hope you don't hate me because I made this review. Thanks for watching as always, and I will see you later with other reviews. Until then, take care and goodbye.